3 years of a loveless marriage until the millionaire finally claimed the wife he secretly loved. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main characters. The night rain whispered against the glass windows of a quiet cafe in downtown Seattle. Inside, the faint glow of the pendant lights painted soft amber circles on the marble tables. Across from the window sat Evelyn Carter, 26, a woman whose strength had been shaped by too many unpaid bills and too many sleepless nights. Her thrift store blazer could not hide the exhaustion in her eyes, but her posture stayed straight, proud, unbroken. When the door opened, the warm air shifted. Adrian Hale, 34, stepped inside. The kind of man who carried silence like a weapon, tall, clean-cut, confident in a way that came from old money and hard control. His gray coat was tailored, his shoes gleamed, and yet there was something colder than the rain in his gaze. He approached her table without hesitation. "Miss Carter," he said evenly, placing a thin leather folder in front of her. "I'm not here to waste your time. What I am about to propose may sound absurd, but I assure you it is strictly business." Evelyn blinked, her fingers tightening around the warm coffee cup. "Business?" she echoed, cautious. Adrian opened the folder. Inside was a contract, neat and cruel in its precision. "Marry me," he said. Her breath caught. "I beg your pardon?" "Marry me," he repeated, his voice steady as if reading a line from a financial report. "Not for love, for convenience, for control. Think of it as a transaction, a temporary arrangement that benefits us both." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the slow tick of the cafe clock. Evelyn stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or run. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No." His tone stayed calm. "You need stability. I need a wife. 3 years, public appearances, family events, charity galas. You will have full financial support, your debts cleared, and your mother's medical bills paid in full. In return, you will fulfill the role of Mrs. Hale, nothing more." Her lips parted, but no words came. Every cell in her body screamed that this was madness. Yet the memory of her mother's hospital bed, the overdue notices on her kitchen counter, and the landlord's final warning echoed in her mind. Adrian watched her carefully. "There will be no intimacy," he added, almost as if granting mercy. "No affection expected, just a partnership. When the 3 years end, we part ways. You will leave with financial independence and a clean reputation." Evelyn exhaled shakily. "And if I refuse? Then you keep drowning in debt while the hospital sends your mother home without treatment," he said softly, not out of cruelty, but cold truth. "I do not offer this to humiliate you, Miss Carter. I offer it because I respect efficiency. You are resilient. I need that." For the first time, she saw the faintest crack behind his composure, a flicker of loneliness, or perhaps regret. Her voice trembled. "Why me?" Adrian's gaze didn't waver. "Because you are the only one who looked me in the eye last week at the firm's charity dinner and told me my company's motto was hypocritical." Evelyn's cheeks burned. She had forgotten that moment standing by the dessert table, blurting the truth to a stranger in a tailored suit. She never imagined he was the CEO himself. He slid the pen across the table. "You have 24 hours. The weight of the paper felt heavier than steel. She wanted to tear it apart, to tell him love was not a contract. But love had never paid her bills, and pride had never saved her mother. As Adrian stood to leave, his reflection caught hers in the cafe window, two strangers, one drenched in desperation, the other in duty. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, Evelyn whispered the words that would change both their lives forever. "I will marry you." Adrian froze, then turned slowly. For the first time that night, his expression softened, not with victory, but with something far more complicated. "Then it is settled," he said quietly. "Our marriage begins Monday." He walked out into the rain, his figure vanishing beneath the streetlight. Evelyn sat alone, the unsigned contract trembling in her hands. 3 years, she thought. 3 years of a loveless marriage. She had no idea that beneath that cold exterior, Adrian Hale was already breaking his own first rule. Never fall in love with your wife. Monday morning came with a gray sky and the chill of early spring. The city outside Adrian Hale's penthouse was still wrapped in mist when Evelyn Carter arrived. She clutched the handle of her small suitcase, every step echoing against the marble floor of the lobby. The concierge smiled politely, but she could feel their eyes following her plain clothes, nervous posture, the look of someone who did not belong in a world of crystal chandeliers and gold-trimmed elevators. The elevator opened to the top floor. Adrian stood waiting beside a long glass wall that framed the Seattle skyline. He wore a dark suit, his expression unreadable. On the coffee table lay the contract she had seen in the cafe, now enclosed in a sleek black folder with 2 pens resting beside it. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," he said. She hesitated. "Not yet, Mr. Hale." He allowed a faint smile, almost a shadow of amusement. "Fair enough. Please, sit." Evelyn sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. Adrian opened the folder. "I have updated the terms as discussed. 3 years, public appearances when required. You will have a personal allowance, medical coverage for your mother, and a trust fund set up in your name at the end of the term." She swallowed hard. "And what do you expect from me, other than pretending to be your wife?" His tone stayed calm, businesslike. Discretion, loyalty, attendance at family and corporate functions, and one additional rule. He leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "No personal involvement beyond what is required. We maintain distance. No real emotions, no complications." Evelyn gave a small, ironic laugh. "You mean no love?" "Exactly." Silence filled the space between them. The city hummed faintly beyond the windows, but neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, she said, "And if one of us breaks the rule?" "Then the contract terminates," Adrian replied, his voice low. "And everything we built collapses." Her fingers brushed against the edge of the pen. It felt like holding a key that opened the wrong kind of door, one she would never be able to close again. Still, she took it. With a steady hand, she signed her name. Adrian followed, his signature sharp and decisive. The moment the ink dried, she felt the air change. It was official now. They were husband and wife on paper, in silence, in front of no one but the rain tapping softly against the glass. Adrian closed the folder and stood. "The ceremony is in 1 hour. It will be private. Only my lawyer and a witness will attend. After that, you will move into this residence." Evelyn blinked. "Move in? Tonight? You are my wife, Evelyn. Even if it is only for the public eye, we must appear as one." She nodded, though her stomach tightened. "Then I suppose I should get used to the view." Adrian paused, studying her face. "You will, in time." The wedding itself was quiet, almost eerie in its simplicity. A notary read the vows. There were no flowers, no music, no audience. Adrian placed a modest diamond ring on her finger, a ring that gleamed beautifully yet felt heavy with meaning. When the notary pronounced them married, Evelyn's chest tightened. It was done. As they walked out of the courthouse, flashes from a few photographers startled her. Adrian's assistant must have arranged it proof for society columns that the billionaire CEO had finally settled down. Back inside the car, Evelyn stared out the window. The city looked different now, distant and cold. "You really thought of everything," she said quietly. Adrian turned his gaze toward her. "In my world, image is everything. People do not forgive mystery. A stable marriage calms investors. So that is all I am," she murmured. "An investment." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. When they arrived at the penthouse, the staff greeted her with polite smiles. Adrian introduced her simply as Mrs. Hale. The title sounded foreign, almost surreal. Her new bedroom was elegant white marble floor, soft lighting, and a balcony overlooking the bay. Yet despite the luxury, the air felt colder than any place she had ever been. That night, she unpacked in silence. On the dresser sat a vase of fresh lilies, clearly placed there by one of the maids. Beside it was a note in Adrian's handwriting. "Dinner is at 7. You are not obligated to join, but it would be polite." Evelyn let out a quiet laugh. "Not obligated," she whispered to herself. "Just married." When 7 came, she went to the dining room. The table stretched long enough for 12, but only 2 seats were set. Adrian sat at the far end, perfectly composed. "I hope the room is comfortable," he said. "It is beautiful, she replied, cutting into the silence. But it feels more like a museum than a home. His knife paused mid-air. For a second, something flickered in his eyes, loneliness, or perhaps shame. Then he said softly, "That is the point." Evelyn met his gaze. "Maybe you should have married someone who likes museums." "Maybe I should have," he said, a hint of a smile ghosting across his lips. They ate in silence after that, two strangers sharing a table too long for warmth. Outside, the rain began again, tapping against the windows like the quiet rhythm of a clock counting down their 3 years. In her room later that night, Evelyn placed the signed contract in the drawer beside her bed. The words, "no emotions, no complications," echoed in her mind as she stared at the city lights below. But somewhere deep down, she already knew the truth. No matter how carefully you write the rules, the heart never reads them. 2 weeks passed inside the Hale penthouse, and the silence between them became a rhythm of its own. Evelyn Carter woke early each morning to the faint hum of the city below, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen, and the soft click of Adrian's footsteps leaving for the office before sunrise. He was precise in everything he did, predictable to the minute. By the time she came downstairs, the only proof of his presence was an untouched cup of espresso and a single note beside it, short instructions about an upcoming event or a reminder for their next public appearance. At first, Evelyn followed every rule of the contract. She stayed quiet, polite, invisible when needed. The maids whispered her name with curiosity, the tabloids called her the mysterious Mrs. Hale, and Adrian's business partners congratulated him on finding a woman of discretion. But late at night, when the city lights flickered through the curtains, she felt like an actress rehearsing a life that was not her own. On the third Sunday, a charity gala was announced her first official appearance as Adrian Hale's wife. A stylist arrived at noon, bringing gowns and jewelry that looked more expensive than her entire past. Evelyn stood before the mirror in a midnight blue dress, her reflection unrecognizable. The stylist smiled. "Perfect. You look every bit the millionaire's wife." Adrian appeared in the doorway a moment later, already in his tuxedo. For the first time, his expression softened as he looked at her. "You clean up well," he said quietly. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "That is your version of a compliment?" "It is an observation," he replied, though there was a trace of warmth in his tone. The ride to the event was quiet, the city gliding past in streaks of neon. When they entered the ballroom, cameras flashed like lightning. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly, but Adrian leaned closer, his voice low. "Do not look at them. Look at me." She did, and for that brief second, the world steadied. His eyes, usually sharp and distant, held something human, something almost protective. Throughout the evening, Evelyn followed his lead flawlessly. She smiled, greeted investors, and endured questions about their honeymoon with practiced grace. Adrian watched from a distance, his expression unreadable, but when one guest made a careless remark about her humble background, Adrian stepped forward before she could respond. "My wife's background is none of your concern," he said firmly, his tone cutting through the noise. "She is exactly where she deserves to be." The room fell silent for a beat before laughter resumed and the tension dissolved. Evelyn looked at him, stunned. It was the first time he had called her "my wife" with conviction, not as an obligation. Later, as they drove home, she broke the silence. "You did not have to defend me." He kept his eyes on the road. "Yes, I did. You are my wife. Even if it is on paper, people will treat you with respect." She studied his profile in the dim light, the sharp lines of his jaw, the calm restraint that never slipped. "You make it sound like an order." "Maybe it is," he said softly. When they arrived at the penthouse, the night air carried the scent of rain again. Evelyn stepped out of the car, holding the edges of her gown as the wind swept around her. Adrian followed, unlocking the door, but when she turned toward him, he looked almost lost in thought. "Thank you," she said. He met her gaze. "For what?" "For pretending tonight was real." Adrian's jaw tensed. "Maybe it was," he murmured before walking past her into the house. That night, Evelyn could not sleep. The image of him standing beside her at the gala replayed in her mind, the quiet authority, the faint trace of sincerity in his eyes. She realized she had not just seen the billionaire CEO, she had seen the man beneath the armor. Days blurred into weeks, and the rhythm of their contract life changed. They began having breakfast together. Sometimes, Adrian asked about her mother's health or her art, and she caught him listening longer than he needed to. She started leaving small things on his desk, a cup of tea, a handwritten note reminding him to eat. He never commented, but the cups always came back empty. One evening, while they were reviewing the guest list for another event, Evelyn reached for a folder and brushed against his hand. Both froze. The contact was brief, accidental, but the tension that followed felt heavier than any contract clause. Adrian cleared his throat. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be long." She nodded, though her pulse still raced. "Good night, Mr. Hale." He hesitated before answering. "Good night, Evelyn." And her name and his voice lingered in the air long after he left the room. That same night, Adrian stood alone by the window in his office. The city glowed beneath him, cold and beautiful. He loosened his tie, his thoughts a storm. He had written the contract to protect himself from scandal, from vulnerability, from love. Yet every rule he had built was starting to blur. He could still see her in that blue dress, the way she smiled at strangers with quiet courage, the way her laughter filled the emptiness of his penthouse. He closed his eyes and whispered to the glass, "Do not break the rule." But the heart, stubborn and reckless, was already doing just that. Down the hall, Evelyn sat on her bed, looking at the diamond ring that glimmered under the lamplight. It was supposed to mean nothing, but for some reason, it felt alive in her hand. She touched it lightly and thought of the man who had given it to her, not for love, but for necessity. And yet, somewhere between the cold contract and the quiet dinners, necessity was turning into something neither of them had planned, for something dangerously close to love. By the start of summer, the Hale marriage had become a familiar story in the business pages, a perfect picture of elegance and control. But inside the penthouse, something was shifting. Evelyn had begun to move through the rooms as if they truly belonged to her. She filled the kitchen with flowers, added soft music to the mornings, and sometimes even caught Adrian watching her as if trying to remember what silence had felt like before she arrived. One afternoon, his assistant delivered a crisp white envelope. Adrian unfolded it, his expression tightening. "The board has scheduled a dinner," he said. "All executive spouses are expected to attend." Evelyn glanced up from her laptop. "You mean another public appearance?" "Yes," he replied, slipping the invitation back into the envelope. "And this one will not be easy. The chairman's wife has a reputation for asking intrusive questions." She smiled faintly. "Then I should prepare honest answers." He looked at her for a long moment before saying, "Prepare careful ones." The evening of the dinner arrived with golden light spilling across the city skyline. Evelyn wore a pale silver dress, understated yet graceful. Adrian offered his arm as they entered the private dining hall of the Hale Group's headquarters. Cameras clicked. Conversation paused for just a second too long. The chairman's wife, a woman with diamonds heavy around her neck, greeted Evelyn with a practiced smile. "Mrs. Hale, such a lovely surprise. We hardly know anything about you." Evelyn returned the smile. "Then tonight is a good place to start." For most of the evening, she kept her composure, answering questions about charity projects and family plans. But when a shareholder's wife leaned forward and asked with a teasing tone, "Tell us, Mrs. Hale, how does it feel being married to one of the most unattainable men in America?" The room fell into expectant silence. Evelyn felt the weight of the question. She could sense the board members watching, ready to judge every word. Then she looked at Adrian, whose eyes held quiet warning but also trust. She smiled gently and said, "He may be unattainable to the world, but at home he still leaves his shoes by the door and forgets where he put his glasses. So I would say he is perfectly human." Laughter rippled through the room. Even the chairman's stern face softened. Adrian's shoulders relaxed, and for the first time all evening, his expression broke into something close to pride. When the dinner ended, they stepped outside into the cool night air. Adrian looked at her and said quietly, "You handled that perfectly." Evelyn smiled. Was that a compliment or another observation? "Both," he admitted. "You passed the first test." She tilted her head. "And how many more are there?" Adrian glanced toward the skyline. "As many as it takes before they believe we are real." The breeze moved softly between them. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, the lights of the city reflecting in her eyes. "Maybe," she said, her voice low. "The only people who need to believe it are us." Adrian did not answer. But as they stood together under the streetlight, he reached for her hand, a small gesture, brief and careful, yet enough to make her heart forget the rules for just one breath. The weeks after the board dinner moved quietly, But the air between Evelyn and Adrian was no longer the same. Something fragile had begun to bloom in the silence, unspoken, cautious, yet undeniably real. They still lived by the rules of their contract, but every shared glance, every small exchange, made those boundaries thinner. One night, a sudden storm rolled across the city. The thunder echoed through the glass walls of the penthouse, and a power outage left them in the dark. Evelyn was lighting candles in the kitchen when Adrian returned home, his shirt damp from the rain. "Of all nights for the city to lose power," he muttered, shaking the water from his hair. Evelyn smiled faintly. "You look almost human like this." He raised an eyebrow. "Almost?" "Still missing the part where you laugh." For a moment, the faint glow of candlelight softened his expression. "You think I forgot how? I think you forgot why," she said softly. Adrian looked at her, the firelight catching in his eyes. "You are not wrong." "Ugh." They sat by the window as the storm raged outside, the candle flickering between them. Evelyn told him stories about her mother, about the art classes she could no longer afford. Adrian listened, truly listened, as if no one had spoken to him that way in years. When the thunder finally faded, he spoke quietly. "My father built this company by believing feelings were weakness. I grew up thinking love was a distraction." "And now?" she asked. Adrian looked out into the rain. "Now I am not so sure." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people begin to understand each other without needing words. The next morning, the city woke bright and clean, but inside the penthouse, everything felt different. Evelyn found a cup of coffee waiting for her on the counter, with a note written in Adrian's precise handwriting. "You mentioned liking it sweet. I remember now." That simple gesture stayed with her all day. When evening came, she joined him in his office, where he was reading over reports. "You remembered," she said, placing the empty cup on his desk. He looked up. "It seemed important." She smiled. It was. For a long moment, they just stood there, caught in a quiet understanding that felt far too intimate for a marriage that was supposed to be fake. But as quickly as it came, the warmth shifted. Adrian's phone rang. His assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. "Sir, a journalist from the Chronicle is asking about your wife's background. They are hinting at inconsistencies." Evelyn's heart dropped. "Inconsistencies?" she repeated. Adrian's expression hardened. "Someone is digging. We need to control this before it turns into a scandal." She took a step back. "You think I caused this?" "I am saying we must be careful," he said firmly, though his voice carried a tension she had never heard before. The room suddenly felt cold again. All the warmth from the storm night vanished, replaced by the familiar distance of their first days. Evelyn turned toward the door. "Then maybe you should start by remembering that I am not one of your employees." She walked out before he could answer, the soft click of her heels echoing down the hallway. Adrian stood alone in the office, staring at the candle she had left on his desk from the night before. It was still unlit, but the faint scent of wax and smoke lingered like proof that something real had once been there, even if he had just let it slip away. Days passed, but the tension between Evelyn and Adrian lingered like a quiet storm that refused to fade. The rumor from the Chronicle spread faster than either of them expected. Headlines whispered about the mysterious Mrs. Hale and questioned whether her past was as ordinary as it seemed. Paparazzi began waiting outside the Hale building, and Evelyn could feel their eyes following her every step. Inside the penthouse, the silence had returned, this time sharp, not peaceful. Adrian buried himself in work, taking late calls and leaving before dawn. Evelyn spent her days in the art room he had once offered her to use, but even painting could not quiet the ache that had settled in her chest. One evening, she found him in his study, standing by the window as the city lights flickered below. "You have been avoiding me," she said quietly. Adrian turned, his face unreadable. "I have been protecting you." "By pretending I do not exist?" He sighed, the weight of exhaustion in his voice. "The board is nervous, the press is circling, and my investors are questioning my judgment. This marriage was supposed to be a solution, not another problem." The words hit harder than he intended. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice trembling. "A problem? Is that what I am to you now?" His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something crack behind the calm exterior. "You were never supposed to matter," he said softly. "But somehow, you do." The confession left them both frozen. Evelyn shook her head. "Then why push me away?" Because if I let you in, I will break every rule we made, and you will get hurt. She took a deep breath, tears threatening but refusing to fall. I am already hurt, Adrian. You cannot protect me from that. Without another word, she turned and walked out. The door closed behind her with a sound that seemed to echo across the entire floor. That night, Adrian found her ring on the kitchen counter, still glimmering faintly under the dim light. For a long time, he stared at it, torn between logic and something far more dangerous. Evelyn left the penthouse the next morning without telling anyone. She returned to her mother's small apartment on the edge of the city, a place filled with warmth and noise instead of marble and silence. For the first time in months, she could breathe, but her chest still ached. Meanwhile, at Hale Corporation, Adrian faced a board meeting that felt colder than ever. The chairman's voice cut through the conference room. Your personal affairs have become a liability, Mr. Hale. The shareholders are questioning your stability. Oh. Adrian clasped his hands, forcing control into his tone. My marriage is under control. The chairman's gaze was sharp. Then you had better prove it. That night, Adrian stood once more at the penthouse window, the city sprawling beneath him. The place that had once been immaculate now felt empty. Her laughter, her flowers, her presence, it had all vanished. He whispered into the dark, almost to himself, I built this life to protect everything I own. But somewhere along the way, I lost the only thing that mattered. Miles away, Evelyn sat beside her mother's hospital bed, sketching quietly. But when her phone buzzed, she hesitated. The screen showed his name, Adrian Hale. Her heart skipped, but she let it ring until it fell silent. Neither of them knew it yet, but the distance they had built to protect themselves was about to collapse under the weight of the truth waiting to surface. A week passed before Evelyn heard the knock at her mother's apartment door. When she opened it, Adrian stood there, rain-soaked and breathless, the city's chill still clinging to his suit. For a moment, neither spoke. You should not be here, she said quietly. I had no choice, he replied. The board leaked everything. The journalist who started the rumor was paid by someone inside the company, my cousin, Daniel Hale. He wants my seat, and he used you to get it. Evelyn's heart tightened. So this is about control again. This is about protecting what matters, Adrian said. He spread lies, claiming our marriage was a scam, that you were hired to manipulate the company's image. I need to clear your name. I will not let them destroy you for something I caused. She crossed her arms, her tone sharp. You cannot fix this with another contract. I am not trying to, he said softly. I came to tell you the truth. For the first time since they met, there was no distance in his voice, only regret. When I offered you that deal, I thought I could keep my heart out of it, but I was wrong. I fell in love with you, Evelyn, long before I even realized it. Her breath caught, tears threatening to rise. You cannot say that now, not after everything. I can, he said, stepping closer, because I finally understand what I have done. I built a wall so high around myself that I ended up on the wrong side of it. Evelyn looked at him, torn between anger and the ache of wanting to believe him. And what if I cannot forgive you? Adrian's expression softened. Then I will still make it right. Tomorrow, I will call a press conference. I will tell them the truth that our marriage began as an agreement, but the mistake was thinking it would stay that way. She turned away, fighting her own tears. Adrian, if you do this, you could lose everything. He exhaled, a faint, broken smile forming. Then at least I will lose it for the right reason. When he left, the sound of the door closing echoed through the small apartment. Evelyn stood still, staring at the ring she had left behind on the counter days ago. She picked it up, tracing the edge of the diamond, realizing that no matter how much she wanted to forget him, love had already written itself into her story, irrevocable and real. The next morning, the world woke to chaos outside the Hale Group headquarters. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing like lightning. Inside, the conference room filled with board members, investors, and journalists waiting for a scandal. Adrian Hale walked to the podium, calm but resolute. The microphone hissed softly as he began to speak. 3 years ago, I made a mistake, he said. I believed a contract could replace trust, and that control could replace love. But I was wrong. Ho! Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Our marriage began as an arrangement, he continued, his voice steady. I asked Evelyn Carter to become my wife for business reasons, but somewhere between the board meetings and the silence of our home, I fell in love with her. Every rule I wrote to protect myself, I broke because of her. Outside the glass doors, Evelyn watched from the crowd, her heart pounding. Cameras swung toward her when Adrian said her name. "She did not deceive me," he said firmly. "She saved me from a life built on fear. If my company questions my judgment, then let them, but do not question her integrity." The room went silent. For the first time, the ruthless CEO stood exposed, his walls gone. When he stepped away from the podium, the reporters shouted his name, but Adrian ignored them. As he walked outside, he saw her through the rain. Evelyn stood still, eyes glistening, the diamond ring shining faintly in her hand. He stopped in front of her, rain dripping from his coat. "It is all out now," he said softly. "No more contracts, no more pretending." Evelyn's voice trembled. "Then what happens now?" Adrian smiled faintly. "Now, I find out if love can be real without the rules." For a moment, the world around them disappeared. The reporters' voices faded, the rain softened, and all that remained was the quiet rhythm of two hearts finally beating in the same time. Evelyn looked up at him, the man who once spoke only in terms of business and risk, now standing in the open, stripped of power, but full of truth. "You ruined your reputation for me," she whispered. Adrian shook his head gently. "No, I rebuilt it for us." The ring she held trembled between her fingers. Slowly, she placed it back on her hand. "3 years ago, I signed your contract," she said softly. "Today, I am choosing you." Adrian's breath caught. "Evelyn, are you sure?" She smiled through her tears. "This time, there are no terms, no clauses, just love." He took her hands and drew her closer. The crowd behind them began to clap, first a few, then many. For the first time in years, Adrian let himself smile, a real, unguarded smile. Weeks later, the headlines changed. The scandal faded, replaced by photographs of the couple opening an art foundation together in her name, the Carter Hale Foundation for Hope. Evelyn returned to her art, teaching children who dreamed of something more. Adrian continued to run his company, but now his office held more than deals and documents. It held a single framed sketch she had drawn of them standing in the rain. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Evelyn looked at him and whispered, "You broke the rules." He leaned closer, his voice warm. "And it was the best decision I ever made." Their hands intertwined as the cameras flashed, sealing not a contract, but a promise. A love that began on paper and ended in forever.